My name is Richard August, and I'll be your host for this edition of State of the State. Our guests are Gerritt, Director of Research and self-proclaimed forest gnome at Prosperity for Rhode Island, and Jeff Mignault, Executive Director of Climate Action Rhode Island. Gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to State of the State.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our topic is the global climate change and its impact on the Rhode Island economy. Would either one of you, Greg, why don't you start off and summarize your position on the issue?
My position is that Rhode Island is going to be hurt severely by climate change, just like almost every other place on the planet. And that in the long term, we cannot have a healthy economy if we don't practice climate justice, if we don't start to work on climate issues and make that central, and I mean central, to our economic development planning, if we don't listen to the communities better, and if we don't really start to make equality in the economy a much bigger part of it. And that's the real focus, is in order to do climate action, you need democracy and you need equality. And if we don't do those things, we're going to have losses from hurricanes, droughts, and the other part of it is that, you know, the natural resources in Rhode Island are going to be much more impacted. And so we need to build resilience, and we need to build resilience starting in our lowest income communities.
Okay. Jeff?
I agree with what Greg says. Climate Action Rhode Island is focused on moving Rhode Island in a just transition to renewable energy. So renewable energy both means we're doing our part on the climate crisis, which the only solution to the climate crisis is for everyone to do their part. But it also brings great benefits to Rhode Island: lower prices, a healthier environment, just a stronger, better economy, a better workforce.
So you're both in favor of the renewable energy okay, going forward, that's obvious. So let me tell you, I'm involved personally in 2 solar generating projects. One of them has been in operation for almost 5 years, and we have a contract with the predecessor to Rhode Island Energy, and it's obviously carried over. They are required to purchase all of the electricity that we generate at a price by contract between 18 and 24 cents. And since Rhode Island Energy took over, they have been paying at the maximum rate of 24 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, this contract is for 20 years. The summer rate on my electric bill, which will change in October, is roughly 10.5 cents. In October, it goes up to like 14 cents a kilowatt hour. Can either of you explain how any business can buy the raw material for 24 cents and sell it for 10.5 cents?
Well, I don't know the specifics of that contract. And, you know, the utilities and how they contract with is, you know, incredibly complicated. If they're selling that product for less then they're paying for it, okay, on that small amount of electricity they're losing. But the fact of the matter is, solar energy is by far the cheapest way to generate electricity in the world. The price of solar energy has dropped 90% in the last, 12 years. And it is just the cheapest. So when they maybe made that contract, or maybe they were trying to foster solar energy, but solar energy is just that cheap. And it's on a straight line decline, and it's going to continue to decline, which is the same with wind power and battery storage.
The other part of that is that gas prices, natural gas prices, spike and go down, the general trend is pretty much upward, though, you know, they've managed to frack enough and poison enough water supplies in fracking that they, you know, they can do it relatively cheaply. But in the long term, gas prices are going to do nothing but go up as the supply diminishes. And so if you've got a long-term contract, you may be, you know, getting a little bit of a windfall now, but 30 years from now or 20 years from now when the contract ends, the price of electricity is going to be cheaper, and all of the new solar comes on even cheaper. So you start, like most industries, you need a little boost when you're starting the industry, and as the industry grows, that price goes down, and the cost of solar energy has gone down, so the contracts are going down. Wind turbines are the same thing. Each new one that comes on, the price is cheaper.
So the Revolution Wind, which you know was stopped and was just started.
Yeah.
So there, the 20-year contract is for 9.84 cents.
That's what they buy it for.
That's what they're selling to Rhode Island Energy.
Are selling it, okay.
Right, yeah. So cheaper.
But what are they paying? That's what is the company? What are they paying to generate it?
Well, you know, that's the contract they worked out, so they could make, you know, that they could build it and make a profit.
Sure.
Profit is
well,
all American.
Yeah, that's the basis of my question. When we did this 5 years ago, we weren't trying to mess with thing.
No.
They knew what they were doing, and they said, we'll pay you 18 to 24 cents. Now, the sliding scale is due to the fact that in the summer, of course, we have more sun and we can generate more power, so it becomes a greater supply.
Well,
and that's why there's
the real reason it gets more expensive in the winter is that most of our electricity is generated by gas, and the demand for gas because of heating goes up. So it's a supply and demand.
Yeah. And
I could show you a graph of the price of electricity and the price of gas, natural gas, and they lot of spikes, and they totally parallel themselves.
Sure, because they have to pay what the going rate is, and, and the PUC approves it.
Right.
The PUC is the one that approved 14 cents for the winter rate.
But there's this, a lot of people are saying, oh, renewables are making the price of electricity go up. Renewables are bringing the price down.
Okay.
The price of electricity is determined right now by the price of gas.
Yeah.
And as the more energy, renewables come in cheaper than the price of gas. So the more of the electricity that's generated by renewables, the less expensive gas we have to bring, the less demand for gas, so the price will come down.
Yeah, by the way, let me just make one comment.
Yeah.
You don't frack natural gas.
Yes, you do. They do. That's how they get almost all the gas, is from fracking. You know, you drill the hole, and then you pour chemicals in it and drive it with a lot of power, and that's called fracking. And that's how all the gas is being released from those shale beds. Okay.
The second project I want to talk about is installation on a commercial building. And a couple of years ago, a company approached us and said, look, we think this is a good spot. It's a good, higher area of the town, and we'll replace the roof you have to make sure that it will support. And they did. And this took us about a year and a half for them to do that. We kept saying, what's going on? And they explained that Rhode Island Energy has, they called it open a window for accepting bids or contracts to supply electricity to the grid. Okay, so they finished this this summer, and we thought sure they were going to do it, and we checked with them, and they said, well, the problem is the grid, not the grid, not just Rhode Island Energy, but the grid can't accept any more energy from solar generation.
Well, I mean, the grid is very complicated.
Yes, it is.
And different. So I have a nephew who works for solar, and he gets very frustrated with National Grid and now Rhode Island Energy, because his company will design, and they do commercial, design a system, price it out, sell it, get
Install
not install it. Then they have to go to Rhode Island Energy
Yeah.
and ask about connecting it.
Yeah.
And only then Rhode Island Energy might come in and say, we can't handle that here. You need a new substation. And that's going to be $80,000, and the customer has to pay for it.
Well,
and so the customer has to pay for the upgrade. And then after all that work, the customer offers, well, I can't afford another $80,000.
Yeah.
The grid has to be improved, and there's lots of ways of improving it, not just building it out, but using what they call GETS, grid enhancing technology systems, that uses kind of information technology to manage the grid. They can reconductor, which is replacing the wires with wires that conduct more electricity, so you don't have to put up new high tension wires. Anyway, the grid has to be improved because we have to electrify everything, and that's the only solution.
And Rhode Island Energy and National Grid before them have basically been the obstacle to more solar. They take incredibly long to go through the paperwork and just hang people up. And there's really not much excuse for it. I mean, they don't need to do that. And
well, they just can't rubber stamp every proposal that comes in.
They basically could if they wanted to. That's the whole point, is that they are artificially setting a barrier rather than actually that there's a real barrier. Now you can say you got to balance the grid better and stuff, but there's ways to do that, and they're not doing it.
Well, what would be the motivation to not do it?
Because they still have a lot of investments in natural gas. And
well, Rhode Island Energy doesn't invest in natural gas.
They still own. They're owned by a company in Pennsylvania, which probably still does fracking and still uses
but you
gas.
just said probably. You know, we want to deal with facts here. So if you know that for a fact, that's
all these companies are still using gas. They are. That's their base load still.
Yes.
And the fact is that they have all these investments in gas, and they do not want to strand their white elephants.
Okay. Let's talk about wind turbines for a minute. A friend of mine is a captain on the Block Island ferry line, and he goes out obviously very frequently. The pilot program was 5 wind turbines, as you know, and he told me last week that he seldom sees more than 2 in operation. This was confirmed to me by a guy who's a commercial fisherman, by the way. So I guess my question is, why would they only be using 40% of the capacity, or is it a fact that those other 3 are down for maintenance, or?
Well, I would.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I know is that Deepwater Wind Farm, that's the name, produces more electricity than the proposal. So why those windmills weren't, I mean, if the wind speed is really low, or maybe they were down for maintenance, but over time they have produced a little, not much more, but a little bit more than they're proposed. So they have done everything that they said they were going to do.
Well, okay, I'm a little confused, because if you only have 2 out of 5 working, I mean, how you say those 2 are producing more than they originally proposed?
Well,
on the course of a whole year, you know, and are they always the same 2? I mean, you know, I don't know the answer.
That's why I said I don't know if they're
But the fact is that over time they have produced more electricity than was written into the contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
According to the Rhode Island Energy, the little insert they put in their bills every month, wind currently supplies 12%, solar 7.7%, and methane gas is 6%. Now, a lot of people don't realize that methane gas is a source, and that what it is, the landfill in Johnston actually generates, because of the decomposition of what's there, methane gas. And there is a actual generating station. I'm not sure if it's on that property or adjacent to it.
Right, adjacent.
And they're taking that. But they can't take all of it, because if you go there, especially as it gets dark, you'll see all the blue flickers because they have to burn off the excess methane gas that's there.
Yeah.
And certainly that's a renewable resource. And,
Well, actually, one of the things that's going to happen to that is as we stop putting food scrap in the landfill, they're going to have less and less methane from that.
Well,
and methane, that when methane comes in, methane is about 20 to 100 times more potent as a greenhouse gas of warming the planet than carbon dioxide, just the way it bounces infrared radiation back. So you really want to reduce the amount of methane. The flaring turns a lot of it into carbon dioxide, but it's still, they shouldn't be wasting it. The fact is, though, that as we stop putting food scrap into the landfill, the amount of methane they're going to produce.
What do you propose we do with food scraps?
Compost it.
Where are you going to do that?
Well, we need facilities to compost it. Some of it, and in the 15 years that I've been working in the compost industry, the amount of composting in Rhode Island has, multiplied by 10. And it's just starting to get, and we're about to start doing stuff for getting the municipalities, and then the feds cut off the grant. There was an $18 million grant coming to Rhode Island that was going to be used to basically help new communities start composting and collecting compost. And if we start doing that, there'll be a lot less food scrap in the landfill and a lot less methane coming out of there.
Well, when you start talking about food scraps, currently people put it in their trash.
Right, and they could compost it and they could separate it.
Yeah, but people aren't going to do that.
Yes, they are. I mean, I know, I don't know about your neighborhood, but my neighborhood in Providence, you see all the little buckets out in front that the community that the composters pick up every week. And, the compost companies are picking that up and now composting it. And 10 years ago, there wasn't anybody picking it up. And now, hundreds and hundreds of people in Providence get theirs collected. Other towns around the state, people are collecting it. We've passed some laws to make big generators now all have to collect it and take it to a composter. And pretty soon, we're going to see more and more. I mean, places like San Francisco, 90% of their food scrap gets composted. We can do that stuff. It's not that hard. Toronto does it. So big cities do it. It's, more people could do it in their backyards. I have friends who've set up compost depots on Smith Hill, right in the densest part of the city. Not one neighbor has ever complained about the smell, and he's composting thousands of pounds a week. And that just people bring it to him.
Right. And just one point, methane gas is the same as natural gas. The natural gas that gets piped, that's methane.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
Well, that's what I said. But this is a byproduct of what's the decomposition process that's taking place. Okay.
Right. Yep.
So Governor McKee said that renewable resources are going to provide 100% of our energy requirements in 5 years?
No, more like, we could go to 100% renewable electricity if the new wind farms come on in probably 10 to 15 years.
But not 5.
Not 5.
Wait a minute. Let's be clear on what we're talking about. The bill passed in 2022, the 100% renewable electricity standard. Yep. So it's complicated, but what it basically says is Rhode Island Energy has to buy renewable energy equal to the amount the Rhode Islanders use. It's a grid that's all of New England, so you can't track the electrons. Right. So, but Greg's right, with the volume of electricity that could come from offshore wind, people have referred to the area off the coast of New England as the Saudi Arabia of wind. It's the best wind resource in the world. The combination of really steady winds and plus this continental shelf that goes out so far that it's shallow enough that you can build the windmills. So it's an incredible resource.
Yeah.
It could power all of New England.
Pleasure boater friends of mine, I'm not a pleasure boater, go out to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket quite often. And they say that you can see these wind turbines go miles and miles and miles. And you're talking about that as a source to provide a good portion of our power. And yet the commercial fishermen say that the continental shelf was where the windmills are being installed was a prime fishing area. The fish aren't there anymore.
Well, one, they're being built, so that's different than when they're already there. They've done studies now around the Block Island turbines, and fish populations have gone up because the base of the turbine acts as a natural reef. I mean, the wind turbines, remember, they're a nautical mile apart, so 1.15 miles. And they're like, the base is like 50 feet in diameter. So, certainly the building maybe disrupts the fish population some, but once they're built, all that activity is gone. You have to know that there's over 6,000 wind turbines off the coast of Europe. All their fishermen haven't gone out of business.
The other thing is if you compare how much damage a wind turbine does to populations, which is essentially in the long term nothing. They make solid substrate in a place that's got a sandy bottom. Fish need solid substrates because that's what their food grows on. But you compare those to like oil rigs. How many fish died when the disaster in the Gulf Coast? I mean, we've got oil spills around the world that have killed way more fish, way more marine mammals, way more birds than anything that the wind turbines will ever kill. So that's not, and the fishermen, some of them worry that they won't be able to pull their nets properly. But remember, he just said there's 1.15 miles between them. So you can do that, and the areas do have greater fish populations because of these artificial reef situations. So it's a long process by getting them built and then letting the natural systems evolve some more. But in the long term, we will have more fish from this. And one of the things is that you've got a centralized system around oil and gas, and that system, creates monopolies. And when you've got a wind system, it can be all over the place. It can be, land, water, and so you're spreading the wealth more. I mean, think of how many farmers in the Midwest, it's not Rhode Island, but the Midwest, where they have the big on-land wind farms, and those turbines are how to keep those are what keep the farmers in business.
Yeah.
And they also froze in Texas when they had some bad weather. And
that was not from the wind turbines. That was from the gas system that failed. The wind turbines continued to generate electricity just fine.
Yeah, Greg's really right about that. Look, the press that came out when they first failed was, it's the wind. But it just wasn't. It was freezing. The gas plants weren't built for how cold it got, which paradoxically, the cold spells in those places are probably a climate change. We talk about climate warming, but what the climate warming has done has decreased the temperature differential between the south and the poles. Yeah. So now the jet, and that differential had kept the jet stream doing this. Now it does this. So at the same time, Texas was having this freeze that the plants weren't designed for. Alaska was at 70 degrees, right? Because it went up and then it came down. So, but often the first thing everyone says, it's the renewables. Same thing with electricity prices going up. People see on their bill these lines for renewables, and they see the windmills and they say, well, it's correlation is not causation. So they say, energy went up, renewables are increasing, that must be causing that.
We have about 4 minutes left. I want to pose.
Okay, and there was one other point I just want to make about renewables, is that we talk about climate change way in the future, but they make the environment a lot healthier. Millions of people die worldwide, and maybe hundreds of thousands in the U.S. just by breathing particulate matter from gasoline and gas. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
We've got now 3 minutes, so you're both going to have to be very brief, but I'm going to give you a little pushback in the sense we've all heard that there's a consensus within the scientific community that we're facing climate change.
Yep.
Judith Curry, who was once called the rock star of the climate change movement, are you familiar with her at all? No. She's the former chair of the Department of Environmental and Earth and Atmospheric Science. And she has come out and said this is, I'm going to quote, "The consensus that there is climate change is a manufactured consensus. Bad data and natural climate variability are the reasons. There is a climate change industry," end quote. And she resigned her post because it got very uncomfortable there because she had flipped over to the other side. Mm-hmm. So very briefly, I mean, I can cite other eminent atmospheric and climate change experts as well. I don't really think there's consensus within the scientific community. That's overstated, isn't it?
No. 98% of them say climate change is real. It's caused by one thing. The physics has been known since 1895. Mm-hmm. You know, that people change their minds is usually due to politics rather than to physics. And the physics hasn't changed at all. You know, in 1895, Svante Arrhenius came up with an understanding of how carbon dioxide in the atmosphere bounces infrared radiation back to the Earth. And the more it goes up, the more it bounces back. And the numbers and the amount that it's bouncing back and the temperature rises match the predictions from 1895 almost exactly.
1895 is merely a drop in the bucket because the fact is, where we're sitting right now, 30,000 years ago, we've been under 40 feet of ice.
Yep, we would have.
So why did the glaciers? Sorry, we have a minute left. You know, you guys got to come back because there's a lot of scientific.
Right, and we wanted to talk about other parts of the economy than just the energy system.
Yeah,
because climate is going to affect the entire economy. Mm-hmm. You know, the food supply is at risk all over the world. Okay. I mean, there have already been many revolutions because people couldn't get enough to eat because of droughts and heat waves. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and how many people are dying? How many people in South Providence are dying from asthma because of the fossil fuels along the Port of Providence? I mean, it's a large number.
We have only time to wrap up. And seriously, we could do a part 2 on this at some point in the future. We'll have to look at the schedule. I'd love to have you back. Right. And we'd like to have the audience come back to future editions of State of the State. And my name again is Richard August, and we thank you very much for coming to view this program.